Hey designers, I just wanted to share with you a presentation that I gave just a few weeks ago on what is user experience design. And I thought it'd be helpful to share because I actually go through and I talk about user experience and design and putting all three of those together to showcase what our discipline is, how it functions, some of the best practices and the methodologies involved, and really just try to explain to anyone the basics of what design is and how to do it. So I hope you enjoy. I did a little bit of editing. There were some people who are contributing. I just want to protect people's privacy and just make sure that being respectful, but also just to make the presentation a little more streamlined. So I hope you enjoy. Yay for recording. Okay, I'm gonna do my best with this. I don't do presentations all that often. Honestly, I kind of hate doing them because I don't really like being in the spotlight a whole lot. So I tried to keep this somewhat lighthearted. So there will be prolific use of GIFs. Yes, I said GIFs, not GIFs. That's where it starts. Yeah. So I had sort of a prompt. Somebody came to me and said, hey, it might be good if you outline what user experience is. And part of me just like stopped for a moment and like had this expression of, what do you mean? Like, what do I do all day? What do you mean? What is UX? And so I actually took it to heart though, because that actually spoke to me of just a problem, right? There's not a clarity on what our team does. There's not really clarity on how we interact. And so I thought, hey, what a great opportunity to just slow down and sort of answer really two fundamental questions. What do we do and how do we work? And I know almost everyone in this room, and I'm going to just take a guess that everyone in this room has actually spent time interacting with designers. Everyone here has paired with them, whether you're a designer or developer in this room, whether you have had to work on something to implement. At some level, everyone works with designers, whether they even realize it or not. And so depending upon how close you are to them, you may or may not be super, super frustrated at times. And so part of what I'd like to do today is sort of address what we do and how we work. So it kind of sets the expectation. So you're not sort of blindsided by, why in the world are they doing this? Or is this what's expected? Like, I don't do this kind of thing, so why would you do this? And I just wanted to also, before we go any further, there is no such thing as UX versus tech. I made this realization last year. There actually is no tech. There is no UX without tech. User experience as a discipline has zero ability to ship to the customer. We are fundamentally landlocked. The best that we can do is specify what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. We can say the design is going to look like this and it's going to function this way, but we have absolutely no ability to actually get that in the hands of customers. You can prototype all day long, but it's not the product. And so I want everyone in this room to understand, whether you're a designer, developer, QA, whether you're a tech guru or a design lover, or you're neither of them, like it has to be both and, or else we don't get anywhere. And so it's just like, it's been a really powerful way of thinking for me, and really in collaborating with development. Honestly, I'm a hybrid. Like, you only see one side of that really at work. I do design full-time at work, and then I go home at nights and I still do like massive amounts of front-end development and play around in PHP and build fun things. And so for me, it's really the expression of both of these that makes a great product and a great experience. So tech, developers, QA, we love you. And without you, we would be nowhere. And it's proven out by our mission, right? So for designers, our mission is to use design methodology to create the best possible experience for our customers. And while for you, that top row might be like, yeah, we don't do that, I'm willing to bet that the bottom row is also your goal as well, to create the best possible experience for our customers. And so we really have a shared goal. We have a shared mission. And really, our mission is even more important because of the people we work with and the people that we impact. Because of the importance of people's lives not being destroyed by use of pornography, we have a shared mission. And so I'm really, really excited to sort of lay out for you the 3 sort of key points of user experience design. And so what I want you to do is I want you to think about user experience design or UX design. And whenever you hear this from this point forward, I'm hoping that these 3 terms, as we unpack them, what they mean and why we do what we do, that you're now going to say, oh, I remember what user experience design does. And when I encounter this behavior, that's because that's part of either the user, the experience, or the design. And so I'm hoping to use this term so that it's going to stick, and also we'll get there. So take notes if you want. I'd love to hear questions and comments. I'm probably not going to take the full hour just to talk through this, but I do want to have some interaction over this towards the end, and probably all throughout too. I haven't really decided how I'm going to handle that, so glad to admit that on the recording that I don't really know where I'm going, but I do. I have an outline. So first of all, is user, right? User experience design. Let's focus on the user for a moment. You have heard this over and over and over and over again, probably to ad nauseum, and you just want to say, designer, please shut up. We are user oriented or user focused, or you might even hear the term user centered. This might come to a shock to some of you in the room because I've not prepared you for this. I actually want to abolish the idea of user centered. You can't be user centered. You can't be, because if you're completely and wholly centered around the user, your business will fail because you have so much value. You should give it to them for free because that's what's best for the user. And so user-centered is actually something I don't subscribe to, but I do subscribe to human-centered. And you might say, John, you're quabbling over terms, but I don't think so, because the human-centeredness of it is that there are humans depending on our business for an income. Every one of you wants our business to succeed because you get a paycheck because we have monthly recurring revenue from our users. But also you want the business to succeed in the fact that our customers want to succeed, because if they like the experience is good, they're going to keep paying you. So there's a human element, but the way that user sort of has grown into this big giant, everything needs to be about the user all the time. Yes, that's true. But it also needs to be tempered with, the interests of the business and the needs of the business. So yes, we do actually love our users. We love them dearly because they keep us with a job. And honestly, they help us to see the value that we're experiencing. And if one of you who's been a part of the member care channel or heard the member feedback has seen that. So from a user-oriented perspective, really the objective is to understand the needs of the humans, right? So the users in the business, and the value that we need to express to them through the product or service. And so we are actually expressing value to customers through our product and our service. So again, user or the human is really just for us right now, when we think about users, it's the person who's using the product or the service. It's the person who wants to interact with our product or service or needs the value that our product and service offers. And then our product or service is actually just a way of providing value to the customer. It's a channel, it's a structure, it's a business that people can actually subscribe to and pay for to actually get the value that we want to bring to them. And I like to put it this way, a product or service has no value if it's not expressed to users, or if users don't want to feel, or if users don't want to use the product or service, they're not going to feel the expression of value. And so really, it all comes down to the value that we need to and want to provide. So a couple of things. We use things like a business model canvas. You've probably heard of this before. There's a company called Strategizer who's really popularized this. I have several books back there on my shelf that I've read through, courses that I've attended. And so really what's cool about this is that I'm going to use my laser pointer here. You have this customer segment here, and you have the value proposition. And essentially what that boils down to, there's people that we want to give our product and service to. And then the rest of this model here, the rest of this business model actually just helps us to say, we can do it profitably this way. We can focus on certain areas of delivery this way. And what actually happens then is that you take that value that you want to bring and the customer that you want to give it to, and you can break that down into even more minutia of what are they trying to accomplish? What are they coming to us for? What makes it great experience for them, what makes it a difficult experience for them. And then that actually helps us make those strategic decisions of what do we and don't we design and build to give to those customers. And admittedly, our team, the UX design team, doesn't do a lot of that anymore. We actually leave much of that to the UX strategy team, really spending a lot of time knowing your customer, putting together indexes and profiles and everything else. But where our team actually picks up is this wonderful thing called a customer journey. And admittedly, we've really struggled to create a cohesive, documented version of this. I'm pretty sure Amber is probably jumping up and down right now saying, yes, yes, more customer journey map, please. And yeah, it's true. And hopefully over the next year, it's something I'd like to actually prioritize as a tool for us. But the user journey map actually helps us to take the whole business case, the value you want to provide, what is it that we design and build to provide, and then actually map that over essentially the person walking through our service and experiencing all the different touch points. But really, again, it is built on that index of people that we are going to be delivering to. So it really is about people. It's about the humans. The right people have to be consuming our product. We have to know who we're speaking to. Unfortunately, that's going to make choices of, yeah, those people, not those people. And that's a really, really hard decision to make because there's always some profitability in those people and even in not those people. And so where lots of businesses fail is they try to reach too many markets, too many segments all at the same time, and they wind up reaching none of them well. And so being very, very strategic in who we choose is very important for the long-term success of Covenant Eyes. Going on then, I'm going to head to experience. So we just talked about the user, right? We just talked about defining who the user is and why we reach them. And again, like I said, the UX design team, my team of product designers that we work in and among, really we don't focus on shaping the value proposition or the business model canvas. We really leave that to executives, to the product strategy team, to Nate's team, and really let them do that. Where we come in, though, is really taking that information, taking the who, and to some experience, the what value, and then start defining experiences for people to interact with that value. And so, we've been accused at times of being, pixies and unicorns and living in fairyland, but that's actually part of the job. And so we're actually going to talk about that a little bit. But really what we do is we define the experience. So it is it's an enjoyable experience. You define the experience so that customers actually have the value and it's intentional. And so for us, the objective in defining the experience is to define the experience that we will be creating to express the value we know we need to deliver. What we're trying to do really is define the experience that's going to express the value that as a company we've decided that we want to express. And that comes from our strategy and our market and everything else. But we do that by living in the solution space. There's always this tension of, you've probably heard, we need to understand the problem. Yes, we do. But you don't understand the problem in the design world by focusing and dwelling on the problem. You understand the problem more deeply by focusing on solutions. And so there's always research that happens. There's always, information that we're taking in. We're always mapping things to try to better understand it. But generally speaking, that's coming through evaluating the solutions that we're thinking about. Where does this version fail? Well, that tells me that there's something about the solution that's not fulfilling a part of that original problem. Okay, now I know that problem a little bit better. So let me think about that more deeply and maybe try to address that in my next version. So really, we're trying to define the value expression. So user needs something. We have something to give them to fulfill that need. How do we express that in a way through an experience that is actually going to meet that original need? And so we do that through user interfaces, through interactions with the customer. So we lay out a bunch of interfaces and we decide how those things interact for the most optimal experience. We define structures so it makes sense to people. We look at the scope of what we're doing and say, okay, this is going to take 10 years to build. We can't express value in 10 years. We need to do it in 2 months. So how do we do it in 2 months? Maybe we stumble onto something that says, hey, if we spend 6 months, we can double or triple or quadruple the value that we would express. And so those are all sort of part of the process. And for us, the experience really begins at that first interaction of the customer. So the first time they hear about Covenant Eyes, first time they interact with an ad, or they like us on Facebook, that's where the journey of a user generally begins. And there's often more to their story that actually prompts them to start engaging with Covenant Eyes. Maybe they use a competitor software. Maybe they're just desperate and they're looking for anything, and we happen to be the one that comes up. But there's some need, there's some problem in their life that arises, generally around porn, that we are going to help to address. And then that extends from that very beginning all the way to the very end where they decide they're not using your service anymore. Our hope and our mission is that when they leave our service, we're leaving a legacy with them that provides them lasting value by never, ever going back to porn ever again. They have the complete wherewithal and the ability to say, I can look at porn. I know what it's going to do to me, so I won't do it. That kind of value is what we want to express over the long haul. So generally speaking, a designer is sort of managing lots of different layers all at once. Some of you may have seen this before. This is called Garrett's Layers of User Experience. It's a book some of you may have read, The Elements of User Experience. There are several different ways of looking at this. You can boil it down to the 5 simple layers, but I love this graphic because what this does is it actually shows the complexity of all the things the user designer is responsible for. Everything from that surface sensory layer at the top, all the way up here, down to the needs and the objectives. Like we're balancing everything in between here. And you can see there's things like the interaction design, the functional specifications. You can see there's structural stuff like information architecture. You can see there's information design, and there's all of the interface design and the navigational design, and how do things actually work together, and how do I make sure that my skeleton layer works with the scope layer? How do I make sure that my user needs and the product objectives, all of those are actually matching, even representing in the surface layers. So you can see there's a ton on the table the designer is balancing at any one given time. And so it's something that when we think about product designers and really user experience designers, they're really working and interacting with all of those layers. They may not necessarily be down here defining the strategy, but they have to actually account for it and balance it to make sure that when they're working the structural layer, that the transmission between user needs, the content, and the functional specs are all manifesting well even in here. And to some degree, we're even sometimes defining the scope of that along with the stakeholder. So what it looks like is generally, we're thinking about the media constraints. And what I mean by that is not media in the sense of like, oh, audio, video, visual, but like the medium or the media that we're expressing the value. So for us, that's technology, that's screens, that might be ebooks, that might be a sign up workflow. But generally it's technologically based, which is why we need awesome developers like everyone in the room to help us with this. Oftentimes it will also look like sketches and like really rough diagrams, information architecturals, structural definitions, wireframes, prototypes, visual designs. So yeah, we spend a lot of time sketching because that's the cheapest media that we can actually express ourselves on. I have a roll of paper down here where you can't see it. And sometimes I'll just lay it on my desk and just roll it out and just start sketching like a crazy man to try to understand, okay, where am I going with this? Sometimes we'll use what's called a service blueprint to start showing where the touch points of the user are, what goals are we trying to fulfill, accounting for all the goals that we're doing, and then mapping them to how they interact with the system. And this is where tech comes in because really we don't have a full understanding of what is possible down here in the technological realm. And sometimes we don't even know the cost of what it might be to build. And that's why we need close development pairment, close development relationships to help us understand that. We also use things to sort of structure information. So this is an example of a Wireflow, you call it, or even an information architecture of the screens or of the workflows. So, you can see there's different little pages here. We're sort of specifying different pieces, maybe notating, hey, here we might want to do this, here we might want to do that, and then showing just the structural indication of how that works. And as you get more and more toward the surface layer, you can see greater detail that we begin working with. So this is an example of a wireframe where we're starting to chunk out where content and items are going to live. This is, sort of like ad nauseum. You've seen probably 1,000 of these. But these are very helpful because then for us, this gets us closer to that next concrete step of what is the actual final user experience going to look like. And then inevitably, we need actually to define the very final version. What is it actually going to look like? And when we get to that point, we're working now in styles, in visual design. We're looking at how do things look? How do they feel? And that's all based on a lot of our brand standards, which really I'm actually even using now in this presentation. This is actually a presentation deck that was created by the brand standards team, by the communication design team, Jason and Grace and Rachel and Trent, all working together to do this. But we'll hand these off, and you can see there's specs here. This is actually a shot of Zeppelin, our tool that we use to hand off to development, to hand off to developers to make sure that we have done our due diligence. And that's an area probably we can improve in, is not just sort of firing and forgetting, but actually doing the diligence to mark up, to leave notes, to try to make sure that as developers are interacting with our work, that we're doing everything that we can to make that work make sense to them, and to really account for that well. I anticipate this next section is going to be like, wait, what? You do what? And why do you do it that way? So yeah, I sort of left design for last. Yeah, and so that's why I have this beautiful mind, kind of going crazy, because that's how it can feel, because you're actually articulating the exact pain a designer lives in, right? We actually don't know what we're delivering, but yet we have to bring form to that thing and express it so we can deliver it, but we don't know what we're building yet. Like, that's the land that we often lived in. And so that's exactly what I wanted to address in the design methodology, because it really, really gets at that key answer. And I think it helps to start paint the picture of why sometimes the expectation of design is that it works this way. Why aren't you working that way? Well, because it doesn't actually work that way. And so that's the key takeaway I wanted to talk about today. So yeah, we can feel sort of like, oh no, this is overwhelming. There's so much on the table. How do we handle this? What do we do? So really our objective with design is to say, we're going to explore what's possible to discover the boundaries leading to an ideal resolution. So really toward that solution, right? Todd, you said it well, like, how do you know what value you're providing? How do you even know what the best way to express that is when you haven't expressed it, because it's not been experienced yet? And that's exactly why when I'm asked to prove a design anymore these days, just say you can't. You actually can't until you build it and it's experienced. And that's actually part of the riskiness of design, is that you can specify the exact right thing. You can say we've tested it and it has been validated, right? We've put it in front of users and it seems to bear out. And then you get it in the hands of customers and it still fails, right? That there's no way to objectively prove when this thing exists, it will happen this way, because it doesn't exist yet. And so that's actually a shift that I'd like to start thinking about in our company, is how do we begin expressing versions of the value in lower cost ways, so we don't commit to a year of building a thing before it ever touches a customer, so we can fail far earlier. But as we see and experience the value of that and the goodness coming back, that we don't just stop and say, cool, job done. And so it really is about, for a designer, spending a lot of time in that solution space saying, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this, we can do that. All right, I'm going to throw these 5 out because clearly they're not hitting that. And we're going to move forward with this one because this seems to be the best option given the criteria that's set in front of us. So just to address something, Todd, the way that you said that was eye-opening to me. You said, when you think about going from like very, very conceptual to that very, very concrete and more finer detail, it actually doesn't happen that way. It is not user needs plus business goals equals solution. Cool, we've gotten there. It's not even, well, if we take the constraints of the project plus the business goals and the user needs, then we get to the solution, right? It's not even that. It's more something like, well, we know we have these set of variables and we can sort of understand what those variables are. We might be able to plot maybe A and B, but we don't have C, D, E through Z. And really, to hit all of those, we could do solution S1 or solution 2 or solution 3. And so in the realm of design, you're probably going to hear me say this more than once, there's no such thing as right and wrong, right? That's morality. That's binary. That's not the world of design. Humans are not logical beings. We are actually very illogical. If you've ever read any book on psychology, or I've been going through Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And that book is so eye-opening because it shows that our very stupid emotional side, and I don't mean that to be like derogatory, but like our emotional side is not logical. Like it will look at variables in front of us and make interpretations, and we will listen to it full well, not having the information that we actually need. And so, we are not logical beings, so it's not quite that simple as saying, okay, well, here's this framework, so let's put the meat on the bones. All right, now we've got this really good, robust framework, and now we're going to go implement it. Okay, implementation done, we've succeeded. It's more like, well, I'm going to jump to slide. It's more like this. It's more like, hey, we've got this idea over here, and I'm going to swing way over here and start creating a couple things to test out my hypothesis and thinking. And then I'm going to come back around and kind of get all over the place. And so there's a lot of back and forth, but you can see there's a general tend over time to get more and more confined. Sometimes there's big deviations that you're like, oh no, like we actually just realized this thing about the situation. We have to go back and like rechange the wireframes and the architectures to account for that. But you can see there's this general flow from chaos down to more and more and more control and more predictability. Really it is like kind of like controlled chaos, right? We have to allow for the unknowns that are in there, but we have to move forward as if we know, because we're going to encounter those bumps in the road. And that's part of what the design method does. And so, I just showed you this slide, right? But another way of looking at it is actually what's called like a wayfinding approach. There's a couple really like high profile designers, people from like Microsoft and a few others that they look at design from sort of a branching concept. And so you start with, some sort of, you start with some sort of prompt, right? There's some need, there's something we need to accomplish. The user wants something. And so we try out 3, 4, 5 different options. And maybe one of them is like way out in like right field. And it's literally the stuff of like, well, maybe in 20 years we'll be able to do this when we have holograms and, I don't know, replicators. But we can't do that now. So there might be something good about that. We can learn about that. Maybe that'll inform one of these other 3 decisions that's actually good. Maybe not. And then you look at these 3 and you're like, all right, well, let's try 3 or 4 more based off of that. And this is where the sketching is very, very powerful, because what can happen is you can go through a litany of 25, 30 different ideas in the matter of 2 hours, right? You can actually begin interacting with them because you're seeing them on paper. You've put it down in front of you. You can begin to start experiencing it. And then you start eliminating those, saying, yeah, well, no, that doesn't work because iOS doesn't allow us to do this thing that we've been wanting to do for 25 years. But these 2 over here are actually promising. There's something interesting about them, and we can't actually implement them fully, but we can take parts of it and maybe implement them over here on this idea. And then eventually you end up sort of with this. Everyone agrees, okay, this is what we're going to do. There might be other things that we've left behind, but everybody agrees that this is how we'll move forward. I think it's important to point out, everybody agrees this is how we will move forward. It may not even be everyone agrees this is the best solution. It may not even be like the agreement that this is even what we should be doing, but this is what we agree that we will do. And I think that's a shift that I'd like to start seeing us thinking more about. And especially as product grows in its ability to sort of help understand where the product needs to go and start directing in that way, that we can get more and more people on board with, okay, yep, I can agree that this is where we can go, and we can actually make this a very viable business. We can help meet the mission of our customers. And it's not a matter of you versus me, but it's us together working together and collaborating. So this is Morville's sort of like user experience honeycomb. And so Todd, you actually started, this is where we start getting into then, well, how do you make those decisions? How do you decide what ends up being red here and what ends up being green, right? You know, that's sort of a critical question that we need to ask. How do you evaluate and critique your own design work? How do you evaluate and critique it? Well, Morville actually has, you know, a really good honeycomb. So in the middle is the value. This is what we want to, this is what we want the user to experience. This is maybe the jobs to be done that we want to answer. And so then you start looking at, well, is the concept that we came up with useful? Like if I want to clean my home and I provide you with a car engine, it's not really super useful. Or if my toilet is plugged and I hand you a toothbrush, yeah, it's probably not very useful either, right? We got to think through that. And so maybe we start getting in the realm of reason when I give you, you know, a trash bag where you can cover your hand. Yeah, okay, that's useful. Or maybe I give you, you know, some sort of rigid rope. Okay, maybe I hand you a plunger. Okay, that's very, very useful for what I needed to accomplish. And so, yeah, I know, a toothbrush. Yeah, that's the idea, right? At some level, we can say, Zach, all right, here's your toothbrush. Go get your job done. Okay, I guess I can use this tool. Is it the best? It's probably not very desirable. So maybe how do we get to a solution that's a little more desirable? And then, you know, maybe I give you a toothbrush or maybe I give you a plunger, right? And it's useful and it's usable. But, you know, or it's useful and it's desirable, but it's not very usable because the handle is like a baseball bat or the handle is like a noodle, a wet noodle, right? Like you can't plunge a toilet with a wet noodle. So for a designer, they're actually balancing all of these things all the time. And that's actually one of the ways that designers make those sort of critical decisions as they're doing that really rough sketching. And then they start putting together prototypes and they're like, you know what? I actually just broke this usefulness of this right here by doing this thing. And so then they're balancing that back out. And just like for development, when you're writing code, sometimes you'll be running down a code path and be like, this is great. This is great. Oh, shoot. Darn it. I can't do it because of that. Is there a library that helps me? Maybe. And so you're doing very, very similar problem solving that we do. But for in our world, it tends to be far less binary. It tends to be far more about a spectrum from good or from poor to excellent. And it's not necessarily does it or doesn't work. And so that's something that I think is important to express, is because as we start developing more credibility here, more findability, accessibility, desirability, usability, usefulness, that actually helps us to provide meaningful value then to our customer. One of the ways then, as we start getting more and more concrete, is just judging the usability of it. And so when you start thinking about that one honeycomb from Morville's triangle, or from his honeycomb, now I'm like mouth-watering for some honey right now. We actually have 10 heuristics from Neilson Norman Group. They're amazing. They're like industry standard. They've been around for decades. I think it's been decades. This is a long time. Like these are long industry standards. And so we use them, and we use them regularly. There's also 26 laws of UX. You know, here is the first 15 of them. If you want to ever look at them, I think it's lawsofux.com. And it's actually very helpful. And you can actually see an article that I'm going to be writing based upon what you see there. That very first one, the aesthetic usability effect. We far degrade that. And there is a lot of research into that specific one. And actually, I'm actually working on exploring that and understanding how do we better address that in our product and our service. So really, if you leave with one thing, I want you to think about this. This is the land a designer lives in. They create and then they critique the heck out of it. And they usually don't critique it alone. So they do a lot of creation. They come up with lots of ideas. That's their job. So when a designer comes to you with 4, 5, 6 different ideas, generally what they're doing is coming to you in the critique phase saying, all right, I know some of these are just bogus and won't work. Help me understand what's possible so I can go back and actually then create a path that's going to work better. And then you might come back around and they might say, okay, so I heard this thing. I know we can't do these things here. That's very helpful information. Now I know some more of the constraints that I'm operating in. What about this idea and this idea? Does this work? Yes, okay, that works. Designers can do a lot of this themselves, just based upon that honeycomb. But at some point, it lands in the seat of technology. And if we create a definition for an experience that is not able to be implemented, like it's just technically impossible, okay, that's where the power of designers and technology people coming together is really, really super powerful. I'm gonna move on then to the challenges of the designer. I'm just gonna fly through the rest of this, and then I'm just gonna open it up for discussion because I'd like to actually have some open discussion here. So the challenges of a designer. Some days, this is me. It's just like, why do I even try? Because a designer fails a lot. And sometimes we forget that a designer is supposed to fail a lot. The whole point of design is to figure out what doesn't work so we don't accidentally ship what doesn't work, right? We fail a lot, we fail often. Generally, we fail more early in the process, a ton, and then we find those tiny little successes, which leads us then to the end. And so it can be a daunting task. And so one of the challenges for designers that our work is very, very visible. Your paycheck, my paycheck, the executive's paycheck relies on the design work and the outcome of the design work that we're doing. It's not just technology integrating. It's not just design. It's both of them working together. But man, it is like you put a user interface in front of somebody and there is a visceral reaction. Sometimes it's like, absolutely no. And sometimes it's absolutely yes. Because it's suggesting a path forward. It's actually suggesting what will be. And actually, that's the point. Like the point of design is to say, we don't know what exists. Like it doesn't actually exist yet. The designer comes in and can begin making it feel like it exists so we can start understanding why it does or doesn't work. And a designer spends numerous hours laboring over a design because they're constantly working through the what's not and the what is all the time. And that gets us to the second challenge of a designer is that what is good design, right? Good design might be, well, it's super cheap for us, so we can ship it super fast. Good design might be, this is the best possible user experience that we could give. Good design might be, it actually is the shortest click path to get to the end. And so lots of people have opinions about what good design is, but I just want to lay out from henceforth, if you ever hear me say it's the wrong design, John, you're wrong, because there's no such thing as right or wrong in design. This is not morality. This is not binary code. You're not computer programs. Now, there is good to bad. There's poor to excellent fit, but there is not right or wrong. And so you'll start hearing me say that, well, that's the wrong approach. Well, no, there's no wrong approach. It just might be a really, really, really poor one, might be a bad one. I like to think of it as maybe there's a more optimal way of getting there. Maybe there's a better way of getting there. And I think that's what's really difficult is because as the domain emerges, as the solution begins to emerge more and more and more, it's going to generate more and more visceral reaction. And that's where, again, those heuristics, those best practices, and those industry standards are really there for us. There's a legacy of success with those. And they give handles and operators on what's helpful for users, what's helpful for the people that we're trying to serve. And designers have a lot to balance, as you've seen. Like this has been, 44 minutes of me just ranting at this point and presenting. There's a lot that we have to deal with and a lot we have to think with. And we have our own sort of set of variables that we have to account for, which gets us then to that third sort of challenge, which is domain knowledge, right? Technology is constantly evolving. Next week, there is a second Apple event in the last 2 months, right? And they're about to drop some new technology on us. We don't know what that is. And honestly, Logan and, Doug and Andrew Keller are probably best suited to speak into what's going to come out of that, right? And so the domain knowledge of what are we building for, how do we actually implement it is very key. An architect doesn't necessarily have all of the engineering skills to make the building, but what he does is he partners with an engineering designer to help sort that out. It's a very, very similar relationship, when the architect is saying, I need a 30-foot span in this room. How can we achieve that? And, the engineering designers coming in and saying, well, we could do it, I-beams there, or we could do, all this and that. There's different ways we could structure it, right? And they're working together and collaborating to get to the end where they're actually making a good solution for somebody. So as technology, as developers, you can actually help, because yes, we are all in this together. You're welcome for that. My wife and I watched this for the first time a few months ago, and I was forever scarred. Maybe it will live with me forever. But anyway, well, how you can help is firstly just be the best. We know every one of you are talented. We know every one of the developers that we've worked with. I have been blown away at times when a developer says, we could do this. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, why did I not know that before? That's the pain of the domain knowledge that really, really, really can be helpful. So be the expert in your tech domain and really, really help us to see what's possible, because honestly, we don't know. We don't know everything. And that's where the partnership actually becomes great. And innovate, toy around with, as you get 10% time and doxa time, I'm really excited to see what developers are going to be able to discover on their platforms, whether it's Vue or it's the DCL or it's, implementing Strappy or it's Mac OS or iOS or whatever it is. I'm super excited to see what's going to come out of that. And always, always, always know our doors are open so we know what's possible. Please keep showing us. I am excited every time that we get a chance to do October, Hackathon, whatever it is. Hackfest, Hack October. That's another thing that's happening out in the world. I'm very excited to see what comes out of those, because it often shows us, whoa, I didn't know we could do that with Windows. That's pretty cool. Let's do that. And really, we want to make the product great, and we know that we need to do it together. And so I just thank you for the 48 minutes of presentation time. I appreciate it, and I think that we can go make the product great together, and it will be super fun and super awesome.